Welcome. Today, we are talking about surviving and maybe even thriving during layoffs. We're going to look at all sides of this equation, whether you've been laid off, you've had friends that have been laid off, you've had to do the layoffs, you're hiring during layoffs. There's a lot to unpack, and our intent is to help everybody with at least 2 actionable tips that is going to make it a little smoother of a ride for you during this difficult time. We've got an amazing panel to walk us through this, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Otherwise, I will mess it up. So I'm going to go ahead and come off of my share screen so that you can see these fabulous people. I'm going to go randomly, please. We're going to actually, you know what? Let's do it just like this. Kellen, then Chris, then Colleen, and then Emmy. Are we ready? Helen, tell us about you.
All right, sounds great. Hello, everyone. My name is Kellen Jazierski, and I have over a decade of sales experience in several industries and segments. But the reason I'm here today is because I was recently laid off. I was less than 60 days into a new job, and it is not the first time in my career that this happens. However, I have learned throughout the years that it's going to be okay. And if you're strategic and you keep the right mindset, then it turns out for the best. And I'm happy to join everyone.
Helen is a former Girls Club protege, a rock star, and has been navigating this with such grace that she was a no-brainer to come and give us advice. I already learned a lot and got a few goosebumps even while we were in the prep session. So she's got a lot to share. Thank you so much. And you look amazing. We'll talk about that too. Chris.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. So Chris Bondarenko, I'm the CRO at MentorClick. We are a leader in helping large enterprises with mentoring, ERGs, and DEI initiatives. On the side, I participate in a lot of different communities. I pursue my passion as an early stage tech investor and advisor. But I just actually joined MentorClick about 5 months ago. Previous to that, I ran North American APAC sales at Docebo. And that's where I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Emmy. And Emmy also got me connected to Girls Club as well. So I think that was almost 2 years ago. So such a pleasure to be here. While I haven't been laid off myself, I've been involved in the decision. I've been in the process, but more importantly is I love hiring during periods of high layoffs. I think there's phenomenal talent available. And actually, my company, I'm wearing my company shirt here. This is our swag, part of our swag bag. If you join us, you get an awesome swag bag. We just actually were published in Forbes today, an article that went live, 3 ways to support and engage employees after a layoff or reduction of force. So good timing. We actually went live with the article today.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you're just going to pass all of that off as your own tips, right?
Yeah. My CMO, Gracie, if you're out there, I love you. She might not appreciate if I pass it off as my own, but maybe I helped influence maybe one tip.
I love it. Thank you for your perspective and for your allyship. Colleen, welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. I am Colleen Carroll with Proactivate, and our company helps organizations to find talent relative to sales leadership, marketing, and really anything that supports revenue generation. And I was excited that Lauren asked me to join today because I think I can speak to both the candidate side and the client side when hiring or being laid off and looking for jobs during this time. So excited to be a part of this. And Lauren, how long has it been since we've been involved with
Proactivate has been, well, we wouldn't have gotten started without your help 5 years ago.
5 years ago, gosh.
Involved with Girls Club. Yeah, thank you for that support, Colleen.
Yeah.
So it's the support of our sponsors like Proactivate, like Docebo, like KnowBe4, our sponsor today, that helps make Girls Club possible. And we've put a lot of talent and beautiful people out into the world. And I thank you for your help with that. And thank you for being here with your perspectives today. I think it's so important for all of us. So I think that's going to be a really interesting and a lot of great tips coming from you. All right, Emmy, close it up. Tell us about Fabulous You.
But not least, my name is Emmy Johnson. I'm the VP of Sales for Marina Life, which, as Lauren was alluding to before, we are bringing technology into the recreational boating industry. So super different industry. I've been in tech sales my whole career. Far different from being in cybersecurity, where I was for almost 6 years, and then learning management space where I was with Chris. So very different, but super fun. The industry is behind the times when it comes to technology. So there's a lot of opportunity. And when I have to travel for work, it's to cool places like the Bahamas or Mexico. Like, darn.
Just stop.
Yeah. No
Sorry.
big deal. So
I'm gonna cut you off. Oh, she's on mute, everybody. We can't even hear her anymore.
yeah, I'm actually though not in Mexico, wherever this lovely place is, but I'm really happy to be here today, not because of the topic sucks, but I've been on every single end of layoffs. I've been laid off. I've survived layoffs. I've been the one that has to lay people off, and it all sucks. If I can help anyone at all today, one person with a peace of mind or any experience that I've had, then I did my job. So
thank you for that. Really appreciate you lending your voice and your expertise. All right, so these are our fabulous panelists. Teresa's put their links. Go connect with everybody in LinkedIn. Let me tell you what we're covering today. It's just tips. It's tips everywhere. We're going to talk about if you're the leader doing it. We're going to talk about what to do if you've been laid off. We're going to talk about tips for survivors. We're going to talk about looking attractive and getting recruited. If you can't stay to the top of the hour, go back and watch the recording because I got 15 questions here. Woo, boy, we are getting started. A quick thanks to our sponsors, Factor 8, who does amazing frontline rep and manager development, and they'll have an offer at the end of this for anybody who wants to level up in their career during this time. And KnowBefore, who, by the way, hiring Taylor T at knowbefore.com, two fabulous sponsors. If we don't know each other already, my name is LB. I am the founder of both Factor 8 and Girls Club, and I'm on a mission to help people love coming to work every day. And so this is a really big, important topic to us. I too am a survivor of a layoff early on in my management career. And when I look back at that time, it still feels like that I'm in a dream, but not in a dream when you wake up in the morning state. It was shocking and surreal and awful. So I'm going to ask everybody in the chat as I go into our first question, please. Where are you in this journey? So you may say hiring, you may say survivor, you may say leader doing layoffs, you may say been laid off, whatever that case may be. Talk to us where you are, like our panelists just did, in your point of view of today. And as you do that, I'm going to get started. Kellen, directly with you, my dear. Let's kick it off. You are the victim of a recent layoff.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing pretty well.
Tell us about this experience.
Well, in all honesty, it was a bit of a shock. My director shared with me, we're going to be doing layoffs. And I thought, well, I'm in the clear because I just got the job, the team is growing, but it was, across the board, it was 50% sales and marketing. And once you get over the shock, then you think, okay, how can I make the best out of this, right? And the reason I made the decision is because I was ready for that change. So I just keep seeking that change. I'm very lucky that in the time that I was there, I worked with some excellent partners, excellent colleagues, and I've just been reaching out to them and getting referrals for opportunities.
Wonderful. How long did it take? Can we just gauge this, right? Because my shock, I feel like, lasted for a good 2 weeks. How long did it take you to switch from, and anybody else who's been part of this, jump in, from shock to opportunity seeking?
It does take a little bit of time, but I also think, Lauren, one thing that I would suggest to everyone is take that time, like take a pulse of where you're at, right? When I first got laid off earlier in my career, I was so burned out. The only thing I wanted to do was visit my grandparents, and I did. And I was so happy that I took that time. So really gauge where you are. I mean, are you in a place where you need a job in 15 days where you're not going to pay the mortgage? Or, are you in a place where, hey, you finally get to try out that exercise class, take that trip, or just spend a little more time with your family, right? And get clear on where you want to be.
Give yourself that space. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I think it's always shocking. I think the later you are in your career, or if it's happened more than once, it gets easier. But I remember the first time I got laid off, it was because I was bottom of the barrel. I had just started the job. I'd only been there about a year. They laid off, and it was a strategic bankruptcy. They filed bankruptcy because then a year later, they merged with like our biggest competitor. It all came out. And I was on track to do great and was so excited. And so it was a shock. And to make matters worse, I had just told my manager that I was pregnant with my first kid. And so I was like, who's going to hire me now? I am pregnant. I'm going to go on mat leave. Like no one's going to want to hire me. And so it was like excruciating. And she was fighting for me, calling HR, like you can't do this. But I mean, that was a huge organization. There was over 1,200 salespeople. And so they just cut it in half, or probably more, even like 60% got laid off. And so, but I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. And I really, really do think that there's a reason that, and you move forward in your career every single time that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we know that we'll look back on it in a positive light, and I do too, right? That was the beginning of my enablement career and all of those things that led me where I am today. Teresa in our chat's going through this right now too, and you can see in her all caps, total shock, no warning. If you found this webinar, we're here to help through that. That's completely normal. Everybody has gone through that. But it's not just the victims of the layoff. I want to switch to this leadership point of view for a second. And Chris, I'll come to you, right? As a leader, how do you prepare yourself and your staff to go through layoffs?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, to start, like layoffs as a leader is not something that you usually see, right? You're more accustomed to the performance or the pit management, and then a performance related exit, right? Or a mutual or amicable parting of ways. A layoff is really, you have to understand this is from a business context. There's a lot more considerations that you have to work through with legal, with HR, understand state and country. So from a leader's perspective, I almost feel like it's actually quite stressful. And when you're looking at it, you have folks, when you're a leader and you're building teams and you're convincing folks to come on and trust you and join this rocket ship, and it turns out, well, the rocket ship might sputter or for whatever reason is having a challenge. It's not performance related. It's the company can't sustain you in that position. That's a real hard one, I believe, to get through. And obviously always have tons of empathy for those being laid off and also those who are still there, right? Like what you do with the folks who are still there. But from a leader perspective, it's a real challenging thing to go through. Yeah.
Well, knowing that it's going to be a challenge, and knowing that there's a personal side of it is a great point, right? Like there's a personal trust that was built and you feel like you're breaking that. And we've got to give a nod to that if you're in that position. And of course, the preparation, like you said, there's legal and there's HR, and it's coming long before they do. And I feel like that might be the shittiest part. That's tough. Right, Emmy? We want to say something?
100%. Like the knowing and having to keep it in and like keep running your meetings and your one-on-ones like normal. When you're going to lay that person off, it's the worst feeling in the entire world.
When we did our Girls Club Rise Up Finale Summit in Dallas recently, one of our speakers had to do layoffs that morning. Because there's also that, right, when legal and HR and the moons align, they say now's the time, and now you do it. And this poor woman was sick all day. She was in tears. It was like, it's hard to say this and victims not feel awful about this, but I think it was as hard on her as it was on the folks that she had to lay off. That's just the hard truth of the matter. All right.
Just to jump in, sorry, Lauren, I want to say one point. Great leaders are authentic. They're emotional. They do all the great things that they do. And then to have to go and do the opposite of what usually comes natural to you, right? So I find I get a little bit awkward as well, right? Like I'm trying to behave in a way that's not normal.
And I think you've got to show that, don't you? You've got to show the true emotion, the authenticity, the vulnerability, and that it will come off as awkwardness. And I think sometimes when you name it, you tame it.
Yeah.
So there's an easy tip for people. Just be like, I'm uncomfortable and I feel awful and I understand this is awkward and I haven't done this before. Right? Fabiola, I see your comment in there and here we go. Helen, I cut you off. Go.
No, one thing I wanted to say was, yes, it's a really terrible situation, right? Nobody is enjoying that situation. But then what comes after? Like recently, I've heard from my director, he's sending me positions, right? The life is short. It's a small world. Maybe tomorrow there's another role, or maybe the organization starts growing again, and because of the way that you've been treated, of course you consider it, right? Yes, it's a situation that nobody wants to be in, but there's also how do you manage that situation? It doesn't end with that transaction.
It's usually a beginning. And you've done that beautifully. Let's just pause here for a second and insert this tip. The way you've leveraged your network is phenomenal. What can you tell people about how they can do that, or any concrete actions they can take?
Thanks, Lauren. I think that came from, the first time I got laid off earlier in my career, I mentioned to you, I realized that, I didn't take the time to build the relationships. I was heads down, let's get this done, and not going to the dinners or the events, right? So then I decided I really need to work on that, right? Personal relationships. And it's about, just keeping in touch, making sure if you're reaching out, make it easy for them. Hey, Lauren, I saw that, Factor 8 is looking for this. I'm really interested. Who should I speak to? Maybe send them, do you have a referral program? Just make it easier for them. People are busy. So come, make sure you do your research before you reach out, and give them something easy that they can help you with.
You couldn't be more right about that. And now we're getting right smack dab into your territory, Colleen. Let's start with, you've heard a lot and you've been sweet and quiet up until now. Just go.
Oh my gosh, yes, Kellen is bringing so much to light about taking advantage of an opportunity to really open yourself up to other opportunities that your skills may have not exactly aligned, but you've done them. And so looking beyond your skill set, and looking, I noticed when we connected, Kellen, that you're open to work on your profile. That immediately can alert recruiters that are looking to hire. And then going out and connecting, build your network on LinkedIn so that your profile is standing out to them, because I know if you have a great profile on LinkedIn, recruiters will be knocking down your door. So highlight those achievements that you have had, and then utilizing those connections on LinkedIn to introduce yourself or get a connection, or get a referral to get in the door there.
Well, we've heard a lot so far, right? Update the LinkedIn profile, make sure it stands out, make sure that you're marking yourself as open to work, highlight achievements in your LinkedIn profile, build relationships now and if and when you're laid off, and then leverage those relationships, let people know you're looking for work, and make it easy for them to refer you to somebody. Did I miss one yet?
Also getting your previous current employer to make recommendations for you on your LinkedIn profile, or I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
Something that, gives kind of a testimonial or a reference that's highlighted on your profile.
Yes. So they give a recommendation, and Kellen, your point, a referral, right? Mm-hmm. So my leaders out there going through this, you would do anything to save these reps, right? And listen, I've been called, a good friend of mine who owns another company is changing directions and just worked his buns off to find all of them new positions, made outbound calls on their behalf to other business owners, other sales leaders, with personal recommendations, honest assessments of talents and skill fits. So if you ask them to do something for you, I think they will be chomping at the bit to do so, and probably haven't yet because they didn't think about it, because they're deep in their own grief and misery with what's going on here. Diana, I was reading your comment here in chat, and I think that's important. You were accused of knowing a layoff was coming, right? And they said, gee, that wasn't very cool of you, right, to talk like that, but you honestly didn't know. It is tough on the folks who are left behind. And in fact, I'm going to skip down since we're talking about that. Athena, thank you so much for your comments. We have a ghost panelist with us. Athena is a survivor. Her organization has done 2 rounds of layoffs, and I asked her some pretty candid questions, and I'll leave this up to you folks in the panel to chime in as well. I said, all right, as a survivor, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the fear level in the organization? So everybody right now, please on chat, if you're going through that, if you're a survivor, or you just want to take a guess at what you think Athena was saying, I'd love to kind of get an average here. Panelists, I'm going to ask you the same. Emmy's a 12, 10, 10. Chris, what do you think? Kellen, what do you think? 10, 10, Colleen.
Can definitely.
Yeah, that's what Athena said as well. She was very kind, loves her company, and said probably a 9, an 8 or a 9. And they actually did a survey and it came back saying that that was the case. I said, so what are people feeling? I don't think this is going to be a surprise to you. Survivor guilt, anger, sadness, not understanding. You grew up with these people through the years, right? So the next one, here's another chat question for everybody. I said, what percentage of the survivors do you think are updating their resumes? So Colleen, let me come to you first on that one. What percentage of survivors are getting ready?
Yeah, I mean, it's easiest to do it on your LinkedIn profile because you can really lay it out easier than you can if you're starting from scratch. LinkedIn has the ability to download your profile in a resume format so that it gives you a great template to begin with. Look online and find some good resumes that may stand out to you and kind of fill in the blanks where you have those achievements to really highlight. And then finally, make sure your LinkedIn profile is aligned with your resume, because when employers start to look at those things, you don't want them to have questions before you come to the table with an interview. So
what do you guys say? Like, if I'm a survivor, should I be updating now or should I wait? Chris,
update
for
it
you
now.
first. Colleen, the recruiter says, get ready.
Yeah.
Do it now. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm big about like self-reflection and like building a bridge and getting over it. So I would actually say like take a few weeks to yourself, cross the bridge, build the bridge, understand your story, what you'd be looking for next, really prepare yourself, and then go.
If you've been laid off, don't do it right away. Wait.
Yes.
Interesting. What about if you're a survivor, Chris?
Yeah, so I mean, a survivor, like this is the biggest challenge, right? Like you've got the guilt, you've got the emotions. You're like, okay, this is not obviously performance based. So even if I'm a top performer, I could still get laid off in another round. And then you've got all these stretch assignments or the extra work put on you. So, I'm a big believer that you should always be updating your resume or your LinkedIn. Always keep your ears open, eyes open, right? So I would start doing it almost right away as well too, because you don't know if there's a second or third round coming.
We just don't do it.
Add to that really quick. So I have like different views on this from being a manager, Chris. Like, I don't want my whole team to like jump, right?
Yeah.
But I also see the other side of it where there is fear and your friends are getting laid off. Is this going to happen again? Should I be prepared? I agree with you that you shouldn't do anything hasty. Don't just try to jump to get out because you don't know. There's a huge opportunity when you're one of the ones left, right? Like, yes, you might take on a little bit more work, but there's a lot more opportunity for you if you are the one staying. I also think it is a trust thing with your organization. So I've worked for a company where the CEO made had an all hands afterwards and made a statement like, listen, we probably laid more people off than we actually needed to because we don't want to have to do this again. We are protecting ourselves from having to do it again. So we probably could have laid this many people off, but we went ahead and did a little extra because we don't ever want to have to do this again. So it was like reassuring the people that were there that please don't be scared. Don't jump ship. This was a shitty situation, but we're good now.
So let's dive into this for a second. Leaders, right? Surviving is hard. And yep, we're doing more with less. Most folks are updating their resume. Fear is real. So let's take Emmy's tip as number 1 on the board, which is have a very heartfelt, authentic conversation about what went down. Don't ignore it. Address it head on. What else can we do as leaders to keep the people on the ship and the ship moving in the right direction? Chris, can I come to you next on that? Oh, sorry, Emmy, you ready?
No,
Go.
I was just going to say that I like Lauren. I think the authenticity is the most important thing. Not every leader can say with confidence, it's not going to happen again, right? Like you would love to say that, but you don't know for sure. You don't know what the economy is going to be like. You don't know what's going to happen down the road. But I think addressing that and saying, look, we don't want this to happen again, and being very open and honest, that's way better for people's confidence and trust than pretending it didn't happen and sweeping it under the rug and moving forward, right?
Good. Yeah, authenticity, honesty, conversations. Chris, add to that?
Yeah, so completely agree with that. I have like two trains of thought. One is an example I'll give, which actually just happened the other day. There's a gentleman I mentor. His company went through 3 rounds of layoffs. The first 2 rounds, he actually had to parse his team down. And the third round, it was actually himself who was laid off. And so when we go to it, like, look, I do not believe companies are experts in this and financial modeling, et cetera. They don't get it right. And I think a lot of times they're far too optimistic that, oh, we'll only need 1 round or 2 rounds, 3 rounds deep. And he actually had to lay off his entire team in the first 2 rounds. That is a horrible employee experience, right?
Yeah.
So that's like one thought. And I'm a little jaded when I hear that, and I'm giving him advice on how to get through it. On the other side, yes, to get through it, be authentic, be respectful. 2 tips that come out of the MentorClick Forbes article that we just launched today. Tag, Gracie CMO, you'll love me for that one. One is like, you can do things like a stop, start, continue. Just identify what are the real important, vital tasks of your role, because there's a lot of like scope creep that comes on, which we talked about, like, taking on additional responsibilities. So stop, start, continue. And then the second one is like, create authentic connections or foster employee conversations. And like, that's really the mentoring angle that at MentorClick we really preach, is like, use mentoring as a way to get the employees who arguably are your highest performers that are still remaining to get through this really challenging situation without losing them. And we know data shows that actually productivity and efficiency drop because this is a huge emotional roller coaster. So I think it's really challenging. And going to my first point is, companies, you got to get it right the first time. You can't do multiple rounds and expect your organization, your employees to really trust you and to be productive. It just doesn't happen.
So the advice you're having for leaders is, don't look with rose-colored glasses, right? Be like Emmy's leader was, maybe almost too aggressive, but be realistic. Don't make your cuts and don't make your decisions on the best case scenario.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. And having to go through multiple rounds is worse than doing it once. Yeah. I've got a friend who recently went like laid off, brought back kind of roller coaster. And that was a horrible situation as well, right? Like, what kind of Mickey Mouse operation are you running here that you couldn't see that this was on the walls? And then, wait a minute, you really did need me? And am I important or am I not important? So also really tough. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about deciding who goes, and then we're going to dive deeper into the tips for those who are laid off. So I know that we're bouncing all over the place. Grab the tips as we go, but we just kind of want to follow that flow and let you know what's coming, because I saw that question in there. Thanks for adding it. How do you pick who goes? Right? There's this assumption. I mean, you used the word earlier, right? I was the bottom of the barrel. And I thought that was really pretty cool of you to say that, because when I was laid off, I made it really clear that it was because I was new. Well, to be clear, I was new and I was the bottom of the barrel, but I didn't have the guts to say that. So how do we pick who goes?
Well, I think that's part of it is if you're newer, you don't have proven experience. Even if you're a rock star, some organizations are like, I don't want to take a risk on this person. I don't know for a fact they're going to be successful. On the other hand, and I was a survivor very early on in my career, and I had only been there a couple of weeks. This was during the 2008 recession, massive layoffs. And I was like, why didn't I get laid off? I like haven't even been through training yet. And I remember my boss saying, because we see potential in you. So there's that. And there's like, listen, if you think about 90% of the time why layoffs happen, it's the economic state, it's financial reasons, right? We need to make sure that we have a longer runway because we don't know what's going to happen. And so a lot of times it is, unfortunately, people that are more expensive. If it's like, hey, this is a huge chunk of change we can get back by letting this person go. people are the most expensive asset in a company, whether it's their salaries, benefits, all the things, all in, they're the most expensive part of the company. So laying people off, that's part of it. Sometimes you hear, and I think this is the where that like fear and anxiety comes in, is you hear like trimming the fat. They're just getting, they would have done this anyway. They would have fired these people. They're just trimming the fat. And that's not always the case. Maybe there are some low performers that are on that list, but that doesn't necessarily make up the entire list.
Good. Thank you for that. Chris, anyone else want to talk about other perspectives on how we've made the decision?
Yeah, I mean, like I not to get into any hot water, but like I think a lot of organizations I mentioned the legal and HR conversation. There's a lot of conversations. Is this the right move to make? And then it's who do we do it with, right? And I think it's sometimes, as bad as it is, it's like the path of least resistance. It's the folks who are newer, who you're not going to have as large a SEBI package, right? It's underperformers who are already not contributing or hitting their numbers, right? It might even be like people who you recently promoted, like new managers or people who are in a new position. It's like those are some of the considerations that I've sat in on before, and it actually sucks to say out loud.
Thank you for having the bravery to do that, but people need to understand it. So now we're going to flip and look at this other side of it, right? Kellen, how do you take that, right? You've recently been laid off and you've heard 3 different versions of, well, you were kind of the fat in the, right? Come on. Is that always the case?
I know. I heard Emmy call me the fat.
How does that
No,
not hurt?
Or not.
Yeah. How do you take that?
I'm totally kidding. So earlier in my career, I shared with you guys that I, experienced a layoff, and actually I laid off my team, and we were successful, but we were not in headquarters. We were so successful, they decided to move the team, and they invited me to go to Mexico City, but it wasn't the move for me, right? So my first experience has been that it doesn't necessarily have to be something negative. And I've always approached it from that, Lauren. I think when you first brought it up, I thought, oh, well, I never thought about it like that, right? So
Thanks for making me feel awful, LB. Yeah, never crossed my mind.
but I think also it's like, I put it in my resume, I put riff, I put it on my LinkedIn, I bring it up. Obviously, it's something that happened. Hey, it happened. It happened to me. It happened to thousands of people. And I don't think it's ever been a showstopper. I also think it's very important. How do you feel about that? And how do you approach it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has everything to do with it, because listen, we have just heard that many people have gone through this. It's kind of a part of life when you're in the corporate world. If you've never gone through it, congratulations. I mean, it's good that you didn't, but the reality is a lot of people do.
One of the things we talk about a lot in Girls Club is fear and shame, right? And these are gremlins, to be sure. And I think that we keep them alive by sweeping things under the rug and by not talking about it. But when you're a victim of a layoff, I will tell you that on a 1 to 10 scale, if you're brave enough, go ahead and vote with me. But on a 1 to 10 scale, my shame was absolutely at a 10. It was absolutely at a 10. And I want to tell you, Chris, you had a point earlier, like, don't start job searching until you're past some of that. Because I think that it's a little bit like quota breath, that desperation that comes out. And Colleen, I'm going to come to you and ask about this, right? So if somebody had asked me, oh, what are you looking for? Or what's going on? While I was still at my 10 on my shame scale, I probably would have had an out-of-body experience and talked for 20 straight minutes about how it wasn't my fault. Does this happen when you're recruiting people? Colleen and Chris are both nodding.
Yes.
How should we tell us the worst case scenario? Tell us a better idea. Give us some tips.
Yes. I mean, internally, even when I've interviewed people to join our company, I was laid off and it was a 15-minute just bashing their current or their previous boss or the company as a whole. Just avoid that. I love how Kellen just explained that and was vulnerable, and that transparency goes a lot further than trying to just express your emotions during that process. And so definitely take a step back after and just have a few moments to yourself to internalize some things, and then figure out what you did love about your job and highlight those during the interview process versus sharing all the negative things, because that will turn away recruiters and people that are hiring for sure.
I want to do a follow-up on this. First of all, go feel the feels, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone has said, don't try to bounce directly back, because if you're just stuffing it or sweeping it or whatever you are, believe me, it's going to come out when you don't want it to. So go get that out of your system first. But then you say it directly. I was laid off. Okay. Do we say the why? My team was actually highly performing and it was a relocation. Oh, this is because I was new. Do you want to hear? And I'll ask you, Colleen, and then you too, Chris, because you recruit a lot during this time. How does that hit you? What do you recommend?
I think that if you're asked why, that gives you the opportunity, but I would not just throw it out there, because a lot of times people are looking, it's, not what you say, it's how you say it. And so just wait for the opportunity for them to ask you, and you'll be able to share your story throughout the process and not have to be defensive, because to me, that would sound defensive if I was laid off because I was just hired, or whatever the because is. I would just leave it at that, and they'll likely ask you why, but give them the opportunity to do that first.
Top tip. And we just watched Kellen do it, right? Did anybody else notice this when she was talking about, listen, it's a part of life, and this is just, I was like, she's portraying a vulnerability and a confidence at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Did y'all notice that too? That was gorgeous. I don't know how you do that. That's really great. So just keep rewatching her and how she does that. But huge tip, don't give the why, because it will possibly sound defensive. Chris, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I might have accidentally closed the Q&A. There was someone who asked the question. I responded and I kind of closed it down. My bad. I'm so sorry. But like my response was like tips for anyone who's like trying to move on from being laid off, I think was kind of the question. I said, yeah, there's three things. Like the first thing is get your story straight. Understand why you're strong, how you got to where you are. Number two, know exactly what you're looking for, both position and company. And then number three is kind of like what you've learned from that experience, which goes back to the whole building the bridge, right? And in that story or that narrative, you can get everything you need to get across very, very punctually and concisely. And as Colleen says, there's no why in there. It's just, yeah, I'm laid off and I was there for 2 months, or I did tremendous things. I was there for 5 years and then I was unfortunately laid off.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about going forward and what you're looking for and what you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always say, like, the reason I love hiring during a period like this, and some of my best hires have been folks who have been laid off even repeatedly prior to joining one of my teams, is they're stronger, they're more driven, they're confident, they're more self-aware. They understand that being part of an awesome company and team is something to be grateful for and not to be taken advantage or taking great, you know where I'm going, not taking
for granted.
For granted.
For granted. Yeah, there you go. Wow.
It's really good point. So I want to reiterate this. When you say get ready to tell your story, folks, we're talking about your story from where you're standing today into your future. We're not talking about your past. This isn't the story of your layoff. This isn't the story of the unfair treatment. This is, I love this. It's who I am, what my strengths are, what I loved about my job and where my gratitude sits, what I'm looking for, which is really important. So I'm going to throw a tip in here. I get a request at least once a week of somebody looking for somebody or somebody looking for a company, right? I'm like a part-time matchmaker. And my first question is always, tell me your dream job/candidate. One, because I think it's really important that helps people build their story, right? But two, because when you go out and say, anything in revenue, it makes it impossible for someone to help you, right? But if you come to me and say, I'm looking for an early stage SaaS startup, I'm looking for something in the MarTech or FinTech space, I'm looking for, I don't know what half these words mean, folks, I'm not, but you get it. Like you want to, like, we teach this at Factor 8 when you are talking about what you do as part of your value prop. You give 3 examples. We call it the rule of 3. I stole that from American Pie. If you're my age, it's a funny movie. So, right, you got to say, I'm looking for something like a director of business development, a CRO at a small startup, or a young company who's yada, 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 looking for blah. Because when you give something specific, when I'm searching my database, which let's be honest, gets fuzzier every year I get older, it helps me actually connect with somebody instead of, oh, anything in revenue. I got
You don't want to sound
it's
desperate.
slippery. And you sound desperate. Really, really good point. Yeah. So you're getting your story of the strengths, and you've got to talk about your dream job and what you're looking for. And that includes culture, leadership, people, where you're working, how you're working, right? So Kellen, maybe you can say more about this. What's helped you really decide your story and what you're looking for? Any more?
Absolutely. Lauren, I really wanted to add to this because, in the beginning, for my previous role, I started in partner sales, and it was just something new, an opportunity to explore this industry. So when I started, I'm like, maybe AE, maybe partner sales, maybe sales manager. And then what happens is you're prepping, right? For example, the conversations, how does my story relate to this role? So now you're prepping for 3 or 4 different things. So I think the approach is you are the product. I am the product. I've decided I want to sell myself. What's the story I'm going to tell? I need to know where I want to get to, right? For me, like you said, my next role is not as important as the culture. Do they have a growth culture? Do they believe in mentorship? Do they believe in diversity and inclusion? Those are very important for me. This is the space I want. I want to be in an organization that really prioritizes these things, right? The person I'm going to work for, what kind of a leader they are. So, in order to get to that, I know where I want to get to, and now I'm going to follow a sales process, right? First, I'm going to do my research, internal research. What is it that I want? External research. What is out there? So, okay, I've decided I'm going to go through my contacts. What organizations do they work with? How many of these align with the things I'm looking for? And just really prep before I start the prospecting. One of the things I also truly believe in is I'm a salesperson. I'm not just going to tell you, I'm going to show you. So I wanted to ask everybody who's on the call today, can you drop an emoji if you've ever gotten a deal from sending one email and a brochure? Right? Nobody has. Exactly. So I think it's shocking when I see people saying it doesn't work. Like, hey, I'm applying to 100 jobs. I'm not getting responses. I'm like, because what you're doing is not working. Stop doing that. You really, truly have to prospect and just put them through the sales cycle. I'm going to pause.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, before we
that.
talk about the sales process, I have to answer Taylor's question. Taylor, you have been so patient. They're like, if there's another portal, I will type it in here as well. Everybody go ahead and vote on this. We're going to go around. As someone who's recruiting, is a layoff a red flag? Emmy?
No, but I will say this, I was going to answer your question too, Taylor, I don't think so, but as a recruiter, like we talked about, when you're interviewing, you don't necessarily need to mention the why. You have your story, right? I got laid off, but here I am, and all the things. Mm-hmm. But as a recruiter, it is your responsibility to find out that why. Why were they laid off? What happened? And all that background, and potentially to coach candidates through, okay, here's a story that you can say, because you do want to know if it was a bad reason that they were laid off. Not that it usually is, but that's important for you to understand. But no, I don't look at it as a red flag. And as a hiring manager, Chris, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I've been laid off, and I know it's for job location, relocation, or, different things. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't look at it as a red flag at all.
I'm going to give Colleen the final word, but Chris, you first. Red flag, no red flag? No red flag.
However, if there's a company that just did a round of layoffs and they're now recruiting, orange flag. And if they've done 2 rounds, absolute red flag.
Good point.
Very good. Colleen, final word on this.
Yeah, I have mixed opinions on this, because there's some of our clients that will say, I don't want to talk to anyone that is not currently employed. I don't care the reason. And the client's paying us to find them those people. So we have to find candidates that are aligned with that. But there's also clients that will say, hey, if they have a great reason, or there is, like Emmy mentioned about relocating, we even share that up front. There are candidates that are unemployed due to a company closing their doors or shutting down a department, or there are valid reasons. And again, like Emmy said, highlight, getting your recruiter to know that why so that they can share your story in a positive way is really, really important. So,
And you know
find
what's happening a lot
recruiting
right now is companies are saying you got to go back into the office, and some people who
Yes.
can't. Literally,
Oh my gosh, yes.
they were living far away, so they were remote, and now, hey, you need to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week. So either you relocate close to the office, or we're gonna have to let you go.
Yeah.
And that's happening quite a bit now.
There's a lot of
I
very
didn't even think
legitimate
about that,
reasons
but
that aren't
yeah.
performance related. So this leads me to just a tiny little question, right? Are we supposed to go in and immediately update our LinkedIn profile to, I worked there through this month of this year, and by the way, I'm open to work? Or do you just let it linger so that folks find you? And if people think you're still employed there, how do you get recruited? So Colleen, I got to go to you first on this.
It's funny you said that because our COO, we kind of talked about that and then kind of joked like, well, we don't want our clients thinking that we're telling people to lie on their profiles.
Right.
But it is such a great point. Like you got fired or laid off on, May 1st and it's the 23rd. They don't give you the dates. It's just the month. So
At what
I'll just say
point
that.
do we feel that it's inauthentic, right? That we're not in integrity for updating it? Do we give it 90 days? Do we have a year? Somebody told me once I have a year to send thank you notes. Right? Do I have a year to update my LinkedIn profile? What do we think is normal on this? Feel free to chat it in as well.
This is my opinion. I feel like that's getting to the point where it's a little bit like, oh, that's disingenuous when
Thank you for the word. Yeah.
haven't in a long time. That's, I do think there's some wiggle room but I will say also, Kellen talked a lot about like working your network and doing research and looking at companies you're hiring. But I will share a story that recently, actually, one of my employees from 10 years ago, probably, but she was awesome. She was a rock star, one of my favorite, got laid off from Twitter. And I would have never known. I don't keep in touch with her like that. She put a post and saying, I got laid off. I love my job, whatever. I would not have known if I didn't see that, but I immediately reached out to her and was like, oh my gosh, what can I do? What are you looking for? Because I wanted to look through my network to help her. And it wasn't even her network, but I connected her with a couple people because I was like, this girl's a rock star. You will not regret it if you hire her. But I wouldn't have known if she didn't do that post.
She didn't do the post. Yeah.
So
look at Kellen's chat. Look at Kellen's point on, and come on, go ahead and come off mute, Kellen, and talk about this for a second, right? When you do post it, people are looking, so be ready.
People are looking, they're commenting, they're sharing. So I think it's just important that, maybe you need a little bit of time to make it spectacular or wherever you want it to be, but polish it up before you put that post out there, because you're going to get a lot of views and conversations. And that can be your starting point for who do I reach out to first, or which organizations do I want to look at? So don't miss that opportunity.
And Kellen, what do you think? Do I have 6 months to update my LinkedIn profile?
I mean, I think no, I don't think so. Again, it is what it is. I want people to know because I am out there looking. So I've updated it already.
All right. So I want to get back to some of your tips and let everybody else chime in on this, but we're going to talk about the sales process. Okay. So we all know in selling and in revenue, right? It used to be 8 touches. Now it's closer to 18 touches until you're getting somebody to go from zero awareness to buying. Most of us have cadences that have touches in the double digits of one side or another, right? What's it look like when you're selling yourself? Kellen, you first.
Oh my gosh, I think it's multiple touches throughout the process and multiple people, right? Really, it's how do you get in the door? Is it through a referral? Don't stop there. Are you looking at the hiring managers? Are you looking at the senior managers? What are they posting? Start the connection. Do what you got to do to get that interview, right? And then we won't talk about the interviewing right now, but for example, before, after, build that relationship with that person, be getting back in touch. Like if I have had a screen with an HR person, they're going to get back to me in a few days. I'll send them something funny in 3 days, right? I'll go back to the person who got me in the door, let them know where I am, because I am building those relationships throughout the organization.
I have to underline that one really quickly. I told you guys I have this part-time job of connecting. 1 out of 5 come back to me. Thanks so much for the connection. Here's how it turned out. Yeah, it makes a difference. Thanks. Keep going, Kellen. What other tips do we have?
It makes a difference. I have unfortunately been through, applied for a position and that they did layoffs. But then this was through an old customer of mine who's now a friend, and she's put my name in for several positions. But guess what? I've gone back every time. Thank you. This is where I am. This is where we're headed, right? So you want to keep that door open and you want to keep the process moving along. I also track. I track everything that I apply for, the different steps, so I can see what the timelines look like and what's working and what's not, so that I can go back and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I need to prospect more. Maybe I really need to work on my interviewing, or I'm not closing, or for whatever reason, to be able to analyze if what I'm doing aligns with what I want, and until I get the result that I need. Yeah.
I love it. So working
And
the
asking-
network and go ahead, Colleen.
I was just going to say, and asking for feedback after you interview, if you don't get the job, just say, what was it? Was it something with my skill set? Was it culturally not aligned? What was it exactly? I would love to make sure that X doesn't happen again, or whatever that is. So.
And I find that you have to ask twice. Does anybody else notice that? Like, you can be like, gee, do you have any feedback for me? Oh, you were fantastic. I'm like, I learned some people don't want the feedback. They say they want it, but they really don't. So
Yeah.
I go this level first and test the waters. And if they ask again, then I'll give them something they can actually use. So if you really want the feedback, ask for it double. Yeah. Chris, what stands out to you? You like hiring during this time, right? So what's the tip from the hiring leader's point of view?
Yeah, it goes back, like, so I talk about the story, and it's like, just what did I learn from the experience? How am I stronger? How did I self-reflect? What did I do to get over that? Like, I think if it's a week, that's fine. If it takes you 2 to 3 months, that's fine as well too. It's just, it's that journey, right? And again, you're like, what I've found is folks come back, they're hungrier, they're stronger, they're more resilient. You know, I just find it's a great dynamic, but you have to go through that. It's like when you watch a movie and the main character has a flaw, right? And there's that narrative or that arc. You know, the ending is not satisfying if you don't experience the bottom out, right?
The music montage. You like getting them when they're in the montage.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the montage to you is you're feeling the hustle, you're feeling the hunger. And so those multiple touches from Kellen, for instance, were going to be a win for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a really good question. And I'm going to ask anybody else who's got a top question. We'll take 1 or 2 more. This is from Athena. Is it okay to put on your resume? Well, so Athena was in a team lead position, and then due to all the layoffs, went back to an IC role, right? How does she put that on a profile or a resume?
Maybe as a bullet underneath the different transitions within the roles. I even appreciate seeing layoff due to, so that, you know, there are no questions to ask, you know, you see it. And I definitely think it's okay to put that on there, and then just find somewhere that you feel like would be appropriate.
So don't bring it up in the conversation, but go ahead and put it in the resume. Not on the LinkedIn profile, because that's really talking about what's next. But on the resume, it's okay to have a bullet in the why.
I've seen it.
You
don't
like
know.
it because it leaves a question, but I can tell you're on the fence. Let's get the rest of the panel to weigh in. Emmy, you look ready to talk. What do you
No,
think?
I was thinking actually, like, because I'm not sure when I look at a resume or how I would advise someone to do that. Like, I'm a big believer in, like, if you've worked at Marina Life for 10 years, but then like have that and then list the positions and what you did in them. And maybe in that case, you say team lead positions and then AE and say due to layoff, you know, kind of thing. So it's like very clear when a recruiter or a hiring manager or someone's looking at your resume and like, oh, they were transitioning into these roles.
Right. Right. Good. Anybody have a differing opinion, or is some additional advice there?
My only thought is, like, I think on resume and on LinkedIn, that's like just a high level summary of your career and what you've done. The points of transition are usually part of your narrative when you speak with the recruiter or the hiring manager, right? And I personally feel like there's certain things that I want out of a resume. I don't want that narrative as in the resume or on LinkedIn. I want it in the conversation because it goes back to their tone, the poise, like the demeanor and all of that, right? That gives me significant more signs or tells as they're speaking rather than I don't want to read it on a resume.
Yeah.
I guess that's where I'm going.
Chris, I have a question for you though. In that scenario, what does the candidate put as their title? Right? Like I work at
Yeah.
Docebo. What do they put as their role then? Do they put AE, their current role?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so like let's hypothetical it for a minute. Like at Docebo, if I joined as an AE and then I was promoted to a sales manager, and then I became an AE again, that would be what I would have underneath the bullets of Docebo, right? And then looking at it as a manager, like, oh, interesting. There's a lot of reasons why a top performing AE goes in, becomes a sales manager, and then there's even more reasons why they go from sales manager back to AE, right? And layoff or restructure is maybe only one of many, right? That's the context I want to understand in a conversation versus read it on a resume.
I have to agree with that. And I mean, it begs the question, and that's really what you're looking for in the resume is to get the conversation, right? The brochure is not there to answer all the questions. It's there to generate interest. I want to do one
like the sales process. You're just trying to get that next meeting, or you're just trying to get that next step in the sell, right?
Exactly. So Chris, you mentioned, listen, how they answer the question is going to be a tell. So while I put my sponsor screen back up, I'm going to ask you for a very quick tip, a warning sign, a bad tell. And I'm going to give everybody else, you've got 30 seconds for a final tip. Chris, could you go first? And yours is, what's a bad tell? Be cautious about the.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we talk about. It's about the employer. It's their fault. The employer is horrible, talking poorly about the employer.
No bad mouthing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Critical tip. Yep, love it. Thank you. Colleen, what's your top tip?
Be positive throughout the process. That will reflect more than anything. And that goes with, if you're negative, that will be the highlight that you're showing. So
good. Mine is be specific about what you want. You heard me say it already, Emmy, and we're going to give Kellen the last word.
My tip is just feel the feels, let yourself be upset for a second, and then remember this is a great opportunity that you have in front of you. So like Lauren said, know what you want, and then that's your track forward.
Kellen.
Get clarity on what you want, get clarity, sell yourself. And there's so many resources out there, whether you're looking for templates on what to reach out, network, whether you're looking for ideas on video prospecting, whatever you're looking for, reach out for help or look for resources. That's a lot more than one, but.
It was great. It was really great. Thank you for that. Use your network is critical. Most of you are here because you're part of the Girls Club network. And if you are as a part of Layoffs and haven't reached out to the Girls Club and those fellow sisters and brothers, then you are missing out. Let's get at that action. Speaking of resources, you may choose to use this time to up level. I want to let you know about the cohort classes that Factor 8 has for individual contributors, maybe looking to up level, and managers. And then know before, of course, don't forget hiring. Let's get that link in the chat one more time. Kellen, now interviewing. Chris, now hiring. Colleen, come get to know Proactivate, right? Get help hiring the very best and navigating this. Emmy, also now hiring. I hope your inboxes and your LinkedIn are flooded. If you're watching this after the fact, know that we are with you. We're here to support you, and anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for joining us. My panelists, rock stars. Really.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody who joined us in the authenticity and the chat and the real sharing to help our fellow folks in tough situations. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.